How's it going, YouTube? Durian here, and this month of Teppen has been pretty crazy with the release of Haunted by Memories, the release of Zero, creating a lot of new types of decks. So let's have a little recap, a little meta-analysis, and see what the decks that people are looking to play are kind of shaping up to be. So here we are, the March 2020 meta analysis. First, we're going to start with color breakdown. Purple is overwhelmingly popular. Now, I think this is a little bit less than green was in the last season, the last month, but this is still just insane with the main color, like heroes of the purple color, taking up 65% of the meta, over 50% of the meta. Red is getting squeezed out, and black and green heroes are kind of able to hang in just a tiny bit, just a tiny. So let's dig a little deeper into what's going on here. For the deck hero arts, we're looking at Rakuhoha by itself taking up 50% of the meta that was recorded, and Fight Against Inner Demons being the next biggest at 13.6%. Both of these coming from Zero, the new hero in Teppen. Now, the next follow-ups are True Power and Bringer of Nightmares. So those are the decks that are really trying to keep up and are the only other ones above like 5%, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, purple's good. Surprise, surprise. So now if you look it over to the bar graph, it's going to show you kind of the count of each type of deck. So X-Hunter decks, obviously Rakuhoha mostly. There's a few Fight Against Inner Demons there, but X-Hunters is by far the most common win condition there. Now there is some Rakuhoha X-Hunters decks that do incorporate a little bit of Resonate, but I thought that if a deck has X-Hunters, that's probably its primary game plan. So we'll consider it an X-Hunters deck. The next most common deck is going to be Zombies. Now this is a new archetype of decks, like similar to the X-Hunters deck, that appeared using Junies and Gates and Zombies and reviving them to generate a lot of MP. And it is so powerful, it can be put in a lot of different decks. It's kind of like the new MP booster engine. You can throw it in a lot of different types of decks. And then after that, it kind of levels off. There's a lot of decks that were kind of just weird, and I didn't really know how to classify them. They were kind of their own creation, which is pretty neat. But things kind of spread out. There's a bit of Sigma, Dalamater, Nero, a little bit of aggro, and a little bit of burn, but it kind of drops off. The main two things are, of course, X-Hunters and Zombies. So like we just said, the top decks in the meta are Rakuhoha X-Hunters, Rakuhoha and other hero art Zombies, and then combined into one category is Solo, Sigma, and Kami. Those decks are very similar, but they follow a same type of game plan. And finally, Solo, Sigma, and Kami. Now these two, while being different, they are so similar, I group them in the same category. They play very similar cards, very similar deck builds, and the difference is whether you're focused on Kami or focused on Sigma. Alright, let's take a look at Rakuhoha decks. This is an example of the X-Hunters deck. You're chock full of legendaries, chock full of one-cost actions, Foresight, New Generation Reploids, Loss of Meaning. All these one-cost actions are meant to increase your memory count, which is going to buff up your Rakuhoha damage and is going to activate things like Devil Hunter Dante. And speaking of memory again, you've got X-Hunters, of course, activating Resonate for V the Mysterious One. So these one-cost actions, they don't even have to do anything. Getting memory is too good. The other parts of the deck are very control-based. We've got a lot of cards like Revelation. Again, similar to Foresight, increase the memory count and get to your more important cards. Exposed Evil Eye to help generate some MP on the response. And a few control cards like Splendid Buffet, Demonic Intimidation, and counters in Unforeseen Interference and Maverick's Memories, just to keep your opponent off their own game plan while you set up Rakuhohas and finally build up to an ultimate X Hunters Ceasefire combo. So if you guys don't know, that combo is you play X Hunters, then right after X Hunters resolve, you play Ceasefire, which is going to lock your opponent's board. They're not going to be able to block or anything, so it is very tricky. The next most common deck, of course, was zombies. They come in many forms and many flavors, so you do have to be aware of what decks can run zombies, and keep that in mind because most of the zombie decks are 2 colors. So if you expect maybe it's a zombie deck, give it a wait till like 5 or 6 MP. If they don't play anything, probably not zombies. So the 3 decks I have shown here are, one is Zero. This is the most common build, is the purple black one, making use of Maverick's Memories and Ceasefire to be able to deal with X Hunters, and also having Foresight and Splendid Buffet, ways to regain life and just have more cheap spells to up your memory count for Rakuhoha. The one right on its lonesome is Jill Valentine. It's a Genesis style deck, so this deck is very similar. Doesn't need to build up memory as much, but uses the zombie 3-cost engine to just keep bringing back cards and get detonations from the Hellbats and use Genesis, and that's how it's going to get its control elements. One very common aspect you'll see among all the zombie decks, especially the 2-color ones, is you're bringing in another color to help do damage or remove the opponent's creatures, because the zombie engine is so good, but you want to add a little removal to that, and that's really what brings things together. And the last one, of course, is a slightly different style of the zombie package, still using zombies, still using revives, but this one is focused around Cody. Now Cody has memory 4. When it comes into play, I believe you deal 4 split damage to your opponent's units, and because memory activates when it's placed, it will activate on the revive. So building up your memory count and then repeatedly reviving Cody with your Hatred Reborn and your Warped Research Instincts is going to put a lot of pressure on your opponent and add a lot more field control to this style of deck. So keep an eye out for zombies and make sure you have a game plan against them because they can quickly overwhelm the board. And the last deck that I consider kind of floating around there in the meta is the Solo Sigma / Kami. These decks, all they want to do is revive the boss monster over and over. And now you can see why I put them in the same category. The Kami one and the Sigma one, they use very, very similar decks. The Sigma one I showed actually does have a Kami in it. So, you know, you see that sometimes where decks will be playing both, but it is so similar. You've got Fate of the Unworthy to help control and deal with your opponent's pesky units. You got Summon Minions and Rebirth and Possessing Malice to duplicate your main boss monster. So if you guys don't know the way that works, Possessing Malice is it destroys your monster, brings it back, but the destroyed copy enters the graveyard or the discard, which lets you revive it with Rebirth, or in the case of Sigma, it'll go back to the deck so you can bring it out with Bringer of Nightmare. So that's kind of how these decks function. Keeping their units alive, and adding extra cards to the discard so you can bring them back with cards like Obsessive Duel and Rebirth. It is a very strong strategy once it gets going, but it is a little slow. Now that's kind of okay given the nature of some of the other decks in the meta, the Zombies deck and the X Hunters decks. Those are also somewhat slow decks. They don't put on a lot of aggression, so be cautious when you're playing these Solo Sigma / Kami decks. So the last thing is what is surprisingly missing from this meta snapshot, this meta analysis, is where did all the aggressive decks go? Like flyer decks and charge shot decks, where everyone was talking about them at the beginning of the month, but you know, we looked at the data that we could get and they were kind of non-existent. Like they were a small peak. I would say probably a little bit shorter than Sigma, mostly made up of charge shot decks, but they just aren't really that popular. And if they were, we'd be seeing, you know, more of them in the snapshots we got. But my opinion is they're probably not being played because they rely on these low cost, high stat creatures, which get punished heavily by the current meta decks. And so you see Fate of the Unworthy destroying a 4 cost or less non-ascended unit can take care of pesky flyers and take care of these 4 cost resonate units that Charge Shot loves to use. And the same can be said for Demonic Intimidation as well. It functions very similar to Fate of the Unworthy. A lot of these meta decks are running at least 3 of these, and they can be blowouts when you spend all your resources to buff up a 4 cost or less unit just to get it bounced to the hand or destroyed. It's not a good feeling. So that's my take on why we're not seeing these some more type of aggressive decks, even though I do think they have some good matchups. So that is it for the meta analysis. Just again, as a little disclaimer, this data that I gathered for this is all from the feature matches in the Teppen channel tab. I forget what they exactly call it, but I'm calling them feature matches. So it's not perfect. I don't know what their algorithm is, if it's random, if it's not random, who knows. But we use what we can get, so that's that. And now I have one question for all of you. With a couple days left in this season and starting off into next season, what decks will you choose to take onto the ranked ladder for the next couple days and the next Teppen season? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear what you are all up to in Teppen. And I will catch you all in another video. So keep on learning and keep on having fun with me here on the Durian channel. And have a wonderful day.